What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2019 Volkswagen Jetta SE. Huge thanks to Volkswagen for providing me with an all-new Jetta here to review for you guys today. So about the Jetta, well, I think that these all-new Jettas really have a nice improvement in their looks over the previous version. It's just a little more mature, a little more stylish, I think, as well, a little more upscale and expensive looking. You know, first off, you have the standard LED headlamps here for 2019, which I think look really nice. Now, these aren't the top headlights. You can get ones with LED accenting, and those are in the SEL. This is the SE, so you just have the standard headlamps, but still LED, still really great at night. I have used them already at night and look great, and really well done headlights. I also just, you know, like the grille, how it's kind of a little broader, a little bit more of an Audi look to it, which I think again is really nice, and you know, it makes this look a little more upscale. I also love all the creases you have here in the hood, all the lines. Gives it a little more excitement to it visually, and just makes it look a little bit cooler and more dramatic. Coming down to the sides, you have these attractive wheels. Even though they are only 16 inches, they're still, you know, pretty good looking wheels. And going down to the sides here, it's just a little bit of a longer, bigger looking vehicle overall for this new Jetta. It's really grown, I think, a little bit, although the wheelbase is only 1.3 inches longer. It just looks bigger overall. And so I think that's, you know, just helps to give it a more substantial look as well. And then going out back there, you'll see some really nice new tail lamps. I think that a little more stylish looking and much more visually interesting, I think, than the previous generation Jetta. This takes a little more of a risk as far as the styling, but still not too crazy or anything. But overall, I think it's just a really attractive package. As for the interior of the 2019 Volkswagen Jetta, well, it's a really nice place to be for the most part. So anyway, first thing, sitting down in these seats, you have these new design seats here for 2019 that are a mixed bag. So these ones are leatherette here in the SE, which is nice to have at this price point. And the thigh support is really good. It's just the torso support that's a little wider than it was on the 2018 and prior Jettas, and so they don't hold you in corners as well. I've done some cornering in this car already, and these seats I really actually find myself like bracing up against something because they do not hold me in. I mean, you know, maybe if you're on the larger side, they might be a welcome change, but I actually miss these seats in the old Jetta. I think those actually supported you around corners a little bit better. But, you know, still comfortable seats for sure, but, you know, just not the sportiest. Next, there's the steering wheel in the Jetta, which is, I think, almost a carryover from the old one. Might be slightly changed, but very, very, very similar. You have a nice flat bottom to it. It is leather wrapped, and it's a nice thin rimmed wheel. I love the wheels in these Volkswagens. They have such a nice 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches, just a really nice and high quality looking and feeling wheel. You have a few buttons on it here, but nothing too distracting or cluttered. You know, and some of the buttons here are even metal, which is really nice, and so overall an excellent steering wheel for sure. Next to the gauges here, which are a nice welcome redesign here on the 2019 Jetta, and I really like the red kind of backgrounds you have there on them, and so that is a really nice feature of them. Unfortunately though, it still has a little black and white screen there in the middle. While most other competitors have gone to a color screen, I know we're in a, you know, pretty affordable price class here, but still it'd be nice to see something that's color and has a little bit more features. This one, you know, it does have a digital speedometer, and you know, some of your basic info, your audio can be displayed there, and a couple of other things, you know, vehicle parameters and stuff like that, but not too feature packed, but nice to have nonetheless. And so overall, you know, still a pretty good set of gauges. And if you jump up to the SEL trim, you get the completely all digital gauges, which are really, really cool. And I think that SEL trim is really the one to get if you want a nice interior for sure, because this interior does have some nice improvements, but there's a lot of stuff where when you compare it to the SEL, it's a huge difference. And that's one of the differences, is the gauge cluster is amazing. The digital gauge cluster that Volkswagen has, but these standard gauges here are nice looking, but you know, a little underwhelming these days. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, you have a completely new dashboard design with this infotainment screen that's tilted slightly towards the driver. And if you're driving, it's a very nice feature, but I did have some passengers that were a little bit annoyed by it. It's not a huge deal. It's not a severe angle or anything, but just a little bit more of a reach, if you're, the passenger trying to tune the radio station or something. But anyway, just an interesting difference to note. But this is the 6.5-inch infotainment screen you have here in the S and SE trim. So a little bit more of a basics, infotainment system. You can, again, with the SEL, get an 8-inch screen, which is a little bit nicer. But the great thing about the 6.5-inch screen is it still has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is great. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't even have satellite radio. It does have Bluetooth audio streaming and AM/FM, no CD player as well. But really would be nice to see the satellite radio in the mid-level trim here. We're not in the base model, but overall, still a really easy to use screen. Really nice, just very responsive. It is fairly basic, not a ton of features to it, but honestly, that CarPlay and Android Auto goes a long way with me, and so overall, I think it's a pretty good little screen there. Coming down, you have 2 air vents, which are a little bit lower than in some other vehicles. There aren't any really high air vents here in the middle, but a cool design nonetheless. And you have a dual zone automatic climate control here in the SE trim, which is really nice to see in a mid-level trim in this class. Usually that's reserved for the higher trims, so to see it in the mid-level trim is really nice. You also see heated seats here, which is great to see as well. And your typical 3 knobs here in a Volkswagen setup, nothing new there, but works well. And so overall, it makes for a very nice and simplified center area here with not too many buttons. As far as storage space in the Jetta, it's pretty good here for 2019. So first off, in the doors here, you have a large map pocket with a huge bottle holder. You can fit, really nice large bottles in there. So well done job there. Coming over to the center, you have a nice large center cubby, which has a rubberized mat here, so your stuff doesn't go sliding around, and it'll easily fit, all the largest smartphones and stuff with ease. You also find your only USB jack here, right up front there. If you get the SEL trim, again, you get a second USB jack, so another nice feature reserved only to that SEL trim. And then coming back, you'll see a little slot for the key. You could probably fit a small smartphone or something, kind of slide it in sideways there. And then you also have your 2 cup holders, which are a good size. And then you have the center armrest, which is really nice and softly padded. Just actually feels really good and plush. And anyway, you open that up, and then you have this pretty large center cubby. It's a little on the narrow side, but very deep, and so great for fitting lots of stuff in there. And you have a little block off plate where I believe you would have your second USB jack if you went up to the SEL, but otherwise just a nice large storage cubby there. And so overall, pretty good amount of storage space for a vehicle of this class. Backseat space in the Jetta here is pretty good, so about the same as what you got in the previous gen Jetta, but that means it's really one of the best in its class still. I mean, I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I have about 4 inches or so to spare there, so a good amount of leg room and plenty of headroom as well, so you shouldn't feel cramped putting anyone back there. Fits everyone with ease. It's not a super feature packed backseat. There aren't any kind of rear air vents or anything, which a few other competitors in this segment do offer, and again, that might be something reserved for higher trims, but here in the SE you don't have any of that or any kind of hookups or anything. You do have a fold down center armrest, which is really nice and soft once again, and also 2 cup holders in there. You also have nice large bottle holders in the doors, which is great to see, and so overall, just a good comfortable back seat though. Trunk space in the Jetta is also superb. The Jettas have always had really nice large trunks for the class, and this one continues on with that tradition. I mean, it's just a huge amount of space, very wide, very long, and pretty deep as well. And so, for a sedan, I think it's excellent, and really makes you wonder, I don't think there's any need to really even go up to a crossover unless you want to fit really tall items in, because that trunk is really massive and should be fine for fitting just about anything. And so, also, if you need even more space, those rear seats do fold flat, and so that'll also give you a little bit more versatility here as well. So overall, a really good amount of trunk space. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Jetta here for 2019 doesn't have the switchblade key anymore. There is no key. There's a little thing, I think, hidden in here, but otherwise, it's just a nice little key fob. I really appreciate that with a lot of other car companies' key fobs being massive these days. Having something nice and slim and small, I think is great for fitting in your pocket or whatever. Just a few buttons there on the back, and so overall, a really great key. But of course, it's keyless access and push-button start here in the SE, which is a nice feature of the SE trim. But unfortunately, you do not get the push-button start as standard in the S, only in the SE here. But anyway, you just put your foot on the brake and hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2019 Volkswagen Jetta SE. So the first thing you notice, a couple of things. The first thing, actually, the visibility is excellent here in the Jetta. You have a pretty large windshield, but you do have a dashboard that comes up a little bit higher than before. And one thing I forgot to mention about the interior is that, this is nice and softly padded now, which is really a nice improvement. But the unfortunate thing is I wish they would have also padded down by your knee here by the transmission tunnel, because that's still rock hard plastic. And so that you actually come in contact with more than this, but it's still nice to look at a nicely softly padded dashboard, I suppose. Otherwise, the visibility out of the sides is pretty good, although looking over your right shoulder, the B-pillar is a little bit chunkier than I would like, but still not a big deal. Still very easy to see out of, and view out of the back is also pretty good as well. But we'll put the transmission into sport mode here. There is no actual sport mode for the Jetta unless you get for the SEL trim once again. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. Waiting. There it goes. And then it picks up decently well. It's definitely not slow, but it's not the fastest either. So we're dealing with a 1.4 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, really small engine. It has 146 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. And so the 0 to 60 numbers are, I think, in low 8-second range is kind of what everyone's been estimating. So it's, I think actually a little bit slower than the old Jetta. So I did a review on the 1.8 liter turbo SEL back in about 2 years ago, the 2016 model, and that one was a little punchier, a little faster. That was like a mid 7-second 0 to 60 car. So this is a little slower, and whenever you're doing a full throttle acceleration, it's not too bad. I think where it's most noticeable is just whenever you're driving around town. Now, if you're going at low speeds, it's fine, but once you get up like over 40 miles an hour, you can tell it really relies on that turbo a lot. Especially, obviously, the more these engines downsize, the more they're heavily relying on these turbos to make that power. And so, you have the power at very low RPMs, but I still feel like you have to wait a little longer than natural in order to get that power. Another thing that doesn't really help matters a whole lot is this 8-speed automatic transmission, which is an improvement. It used to only be a 6-speed automatic in the Jettas, and so this 8-speed is a nice improvement for 2019, but the way that they tuned it is for maximum fuel economy. And I get it, this is a commuter car for most people. It's not going to be driven in a sporty manner most of the time, but I have to push the gas like more than halfway for it to initiate a downshift. And with 8 gears to play with, you would think it'd be a little more willing to give you a little bit of a downshift. Because there are so many gears to choose from, you think it'd want to, give you a better gear a lot quicker than it does. Now that, in sport mode, it will kind of hang on to those gears a little bit longer. But especially, at least me personally as an enthusiast, I have to drive this in sport mode, because if I leave it in normal mode, it just takes forever. It'll just immediately, upshift to a high gear, and then trying to get a downshift often takes longer than I would like. So that's a little frustrating, if I'm perfectly honest. You can still thankfully get these in a manual, and then you can just do it yourself and not have the issue. And so it is really nice they're still continuing to offer a manual here in the Jetta. And of course, if you do want a sportier Jetta, they have confirmed a GLI version is coming with probably the same engine as the Volkswagen GTI, 220 horsepower, I think 260 pound-feet of torque or whatever, much more punch. And it will also, probably have everything else much sportier to go along with that. So if you want a sporty Jetta, I would definitely wait. I think that's supposed to be coming next year. But as we're going around some corners here, let's see how it handles. So there is a good amount of body roll, and like I said, these seats aren't holding me, and so I'm kind of having to, brace myself up against them a little bit here. So it rolls, but then it does kind of get settled. Especially at lower speed turns here. Whenever you're at some higher speed stuff, I noticed earlier, it does want to lean a little bit more. It's still, so here's the interesting thing about the Jetta. So for 2019, they got rid of the independent rear suspension and swapped out for a torsion beam rear suspension, I think in an effort to kind of keep the cost down. These are about $100 cheaper than last year's Jetta, even though you have all these improvements and larger size and stuff. So, they did a pretty good job with it. It's just, it doesn't have the same really good Volkswagen handling you expect from a Volkswagen. They used to always have a signature kind of feeling, and this is kind of letting me down a little bit. Just kind of wants to push a little bit more, doesn't dive in as much as I would like it to. I think the tire and wheel setup doesn't help this one either, because, again, if I was in the SEL, I'd have 17-inch wheels. Instead, I have 16 inches wheels, and then, I also have 60 series sidewall tires here on this SE with these, touring tires. I think they're Bridgestone Ecopias, and so, I think if you had the SEL, once again, I think the bottom line here that I'm discovering is the SEL is the one to get. I think that would probably improve your handling a little bit, probably still wouldn't sacrifice any ride comfort, because the Jetta for 2019 is now on the MQB platform, same as the Mark 7 Golfs that have been on for a few years now. But so because of that longer wheelbase, 1.3 inches isn't huge, but that just helps to give you a smooth ride. And so it is a very smooth, comfortable ride. And again, this gets back to this Jetta is not set up to be driven sportingly. But again, even just in the past, driving Passats and reviewing any kind of Volkswagen, honestly, even the Atlas has a pretty flat handling characteristic to it, whereas this just has a little more roll than I would expect out of a car that's so light as well. They're very proud of the fact these weigh less than 3,000 pounds, just under 3,000 pounds, which is very impressive, and usually means that the vehicles are very light in their handling, and this does feel pretty good, but we'll drive it a little bit more here. A couple other things though while we continue to go around some corners here. Steering weight, as the car decided to freak out for a completely empty road. I'm not sure what that was about, but anyway, what I was going to say was the steering weight is the trademark Volkswagen steering weight, where it's a nice light steering, but it's still accurate and precise, and it's well weighted with its feedback and its resistance, so that it just feels really nice and dialed in. And that is something that has carried over, thankfully, from previous Volkswagens that I really like. Another thing that's very responsive is the brakes and the throttle. Brakes have nice bite right towards the top of the pedal and feel really nice and strong. Throttle response though is really good. Now again, you have that turbo delay, so that kind of forces you to make little adjustments to your throttle application, because once that turbo comes on, then you kind of got to back off the throttle a little bit, but it is very responsive though, and it starts taking action as soon as you start putting on some pedal pressure there. So that's really nice. It's, again, I think it really comes down to this sidewalls, I think, and just it's just not quite as sophisticated of a suspension setup, and so it's not as fun to push in corners as the old Jetta, even the SEL one. I know this isn't the sporting one, but even the non-sporting Jettas in the past, I think handle a little bit better. So again, it just comes down to your personal preferences and what's important to you. If you just want a comfortable, roomy, refined commuter vehicle, and you're not bombing down a back road like this on a regular basis, then this probably will never bother you. But even on on-ramps and stuff, I've noticed doing that in the past few days of driving, it just, you feel the roll a little bit more, so it just kind of discourages you from pushing it, and kind of feels like it doesn't want to be pushed or driven sportingly. It just wants to kind of chill and cruise. So if you do that, it feels great. Otherwise though, it just feels a little out of its comfort zone, which again is something that usually wasn't something I would have said about other Volkswagens in the past. So you do get more vehicle for your money, and I think for the average consumer, this is going to, all those changes Volkswagen made make sense, and they're worth it, because you do get a much nicer interior, more room, the larger size of the vehicle and everything is nicely improved. You also do get that safety tech, even though it did go off falsely for me once there. That's the first time it's actually gone off falsely. Otherwise, it hasn't intervened or anything during my time of driving here. And also in the SE trim, you do get blind spot monitoring and the rear cross traffic alert, which is nice as well. As a commuter vehicle though, the Jetta is really, really great because of the light steering. Zipping around town and stuff, parking, all that type of stuff is really, really easy to do. And because it's punchy at the lower RPMs there, it feels pretty zippy, at low speeds, like I said. So it's a really great car for the casual driver that just wants to get from point A to point B, with a little bit of style, and comfort. I think this is a really great choice. Another thing that's really nice is the fuel economy here is a huge improvement in the 2019 Jettas. So it's about 4 to 5 mpg higher than the 2018 Jetta in just about every regard. So city, these are rated at 30. It's 40 on the highway for a combined average of 34. Now, I only put about 90 miles on this vehicle so far, but in my time of driving, I averaged 30.6 mpg, and there was a decent amount of idling in there too. I think before the idling, it was closer to about 33, so fairly close to that combined number, even though I would say that majority of my driving was highway. You know, it wasn't a huge majority, but a decent amount was highway, and so, you know, I was expecting a little bit higher, but I can certainly see how if you baby this and you're not hammering on it like I have been, you know, you could definitely get those numbers, I think, very, very easily. And the fact that I'm still hammering on it and getting 30 mpg is still really good. So that's, you know, I think lives up to expectations there, and, you know, that's a definite improvement over the previous Jetta. One thing that is another also improvement, lastly, is the pricing here of the Jetta. So, like I said, about $100 or so cheaper across the board, it seems. So this SE trim, as tested, is $22,155. And so that also, in addition to all the other stuff I showed, it also gives you the panoramic moonroof, which panoramic is a stretch. It's definitely larger than an average moonroof, but it doesn't go the entire length of the roof like most panoramic moonroofs do. But still is a nice feature. You know, the heated seats, the auto climate control, the push button start, all that stuff is really, really nice. But honestly, the the base model is really a lot of car for its base starting price of $18,500. At that price, you still get the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto screen. You still get LED headlamps. And, you know, much of the other stuff, you don't get the heated seats or auto climate control and stuff like that, but still, for a base vehicle at that price, a very, very competitive vehicle, you get a lot for your money, and that is one strong thing with the Volkswagens. They really do give you a lot for your money here with these new ones. And then if you do want to go for, you know, like, for example, if you wanted a little bit better handling, you can go up to the R line, which is only about $700 more than the SE here, and that gives you those 17-inch wheels, a little bit of a sportier appearance, and it should be a little bit better handling, hopefully with, you know, smaller sidewalls and things like that. But then if you want to go to the SEL one, like I mentioned, you know, it has the nice digital cockpit, the Beats audio, you know, a lot of other nicer features, ambient lighting, things like that. Those are pretty reasonable as well. So those started just over $24,000, I think like $24,500. And I mean, that's also really solid. I mean, what other vehicle at $24,000 gives you a completely digital gauge cluster? I think the only other thing, the only other one that does is the new Toyota Corolla hatchback, which also, I think, for that similar price, has some nicer materials. I think by your knee area, it is padded with soft material, stuff like that. So that felt a little more premium. So if you're looking for the most premium interior, that new Corolla is, I think, a little bit nicer in that regard, but that's really one of the only ones that beats it. Otherwise, this is still, you know, a standout as far as interior quality, I think, for the price. And again, just the pricing of these Jettas is very, very competitive, and so they're really good at giving you a lot for your money. And even though, you know, maybe the handling and the performance has taken a little bit of a step back, I don't think most Jetta buyers will mind. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. They are going to have the GLI. That is for the enthusiast. That's the one to buy if you're an enthusiast. And those have always been very reasonably priced as well. So that's not a huge premium or anything that's way more expensive. So I would recommend, you know, again, waiting for that if you do want a sporty one. But for those that just want a nice, comfortable commuter, I think this is a really solid choice still. Although, again, there are still some that, you know, are a little more fun even without a performance version. I think the Mazda 3 is still the best handling in this segment, and still very comfortable, very punchy. Not quite as spacious, though, so that's where you give up a little bit of interior room and sacrifice that. You don't get CarPlay and stuff like that in the Mazda 3 either. So, you know, but if you want the best driving dynamic vehicle for that price, I think that's probably one of the ones to go with. The new Corolla is also a very, you know, fun little vehicle to drive with a little bit better handling, I think, here than the Jetta. But, you know, like I said, the Jetta on its own is still very fun, you know, for the most part, you know, unless you start pushing into the corners there. And even that's something I think a wheel and tire package would greatly improve. So anyway, huge thanks once again to Volkswagen for providing me with the 2019 Jetta here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the new Jetta in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.